marciano sentado en el agua con vuelo de taca que quiere entrar. ¿Es la sopa? ¿Qué chingados? ¿Es la sopa de hongos que no se vean así?
¿Qué hay, mi gente? ¿Qué pasa? ¿Cómo andamos? Bienvenidos al canal. Y para mis suscriptores, bienvenidos de nuevo. Hoy vemos algunos videos de TikTok que usan un sonido que se volvió viral. Y hablaremos de lo que podemos aprender. If you guys are anything like me, you spend enough time online that you find all these different videos that just have these sounds that just itch the back of your brain and they burrow themselves in there and you cannot leave them alone. You find yourself singing or repeating these certain lines just throughout your day-to-day. Obviously, that's something that happens a lot in the Spanish-speaking community as well. About a year ago, I found these videos that use this sound that I was just obsessed with for a while. So obviously, I'm gonna bug you guys and get it stuck inside your head too. I mean, that's my job, right? Before we get into it, I do want to let you all know that there is a lot of vulgarity here. There's a lot of curse words. A lot of them are really specific to Mexico, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, this is not a video for the kiddos. Viewer discretion is definitely advised. But we're gonna go ahead and get into it. I'm gonna play it once all the way through, and then we'll go back in and we'll break down what we can learn from it bit by bit. Because this is a trend that was really big on TikTok for a while, I've got a lot of different examples for you here, so we're gonna have a little fun with it. We're gonna kind of bounce back and forth between some of these different examples. We'll do it once all the way through, and then we'll do it again and break down what we can learn from it. Okay?
Ay, cabrón, ¿ya viste eso?
¿Ah?
Ven.
¿Qué es eso?
Mira, checa. Un marciano.
¿Un marciano?
Un marciano sentado en el ala.
¿Un marciano sentado en el ala?
Un marciano sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca.
¿Un marciano sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca?
Un marciano sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca que quiere entrar.
¿Un marciano sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca que quiere entrar?
¿O es la sopa?
¿Qué chingallos?
¿O es la sopa de hongos que me hace ver al marciano que está sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca que quiere entrar?
A huevo que es la sopa de hongos que me hace ver al marciano que está sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca que quiere entrar.
Me convierto en marciano.
And even a year later, that is just, it just gets inside my head. I still remember every single word and every single beat of the music. So let's go ahead, we're gonna dive back in and we're just gonna break down bit by bit as we go through what we can learn from it, all right?
Ay, cabrón, ¿ya viste eso?
¿Ah?
Ven.
¿Qué es eso?
Mira, checa. Un marciano.
¿Un marciano?
Un marciano sentado en el ala.
Like I mentioned, there is a lot of cursing in this video. The very first thing that it starts off with is "ay cabrón." Now, that word "cabrón," it's very vulgar. First off, and it's very Mexican. It can be used to mean a lot of different things. It can be used as just kind of like an expletive that we just say when something happens, like "ah shit," like "ay cabrón." But it can also be used to call somebody some pretty mean words like bastard, son of a bitch, a fucker, asshole, cabrón. It's a really mean word, but it's also something that we can use to talk to our friends, you know, kind of like how we say, hey, dickhead, like, you know, just being mean, but in a fun way. The other thing I really want to talk about here is that sentado en el ala. Now, the word sentado is, technically, it would be considered like an adjective. It's not used in the same way that we say sitting in English. If you try to translate that into Spanish using the progressive aspect and you say sentando, that's not gonna really describe someone who's sat down, somebody who is currently sitting. That's really just gonna be talking about someone who is sitting down in the moment, like they're going from a standing position to sitting down. So sentado, even though it would technically mean more like sat if we want to try to directly translate it into English, and in this case it's really how we're going to say sitting. So just keep that in mind. Like I talk about in my progressive aspect video, that's something that you can't overuse, and you cannot use it just because your word in English that you're trying to translate ends with ing. It just doesn't work that way, guys, so just keep that in mind. Now, the other thing I really want to talk about here is something that I've kind of touched briefly on before in a previous immersion exercise, but that's that el ala. Now, this is something that is a lot more in-depth, but I don't think it really calls for a whole structured lesson on its own. So I've actually called in for some help today. We're going to have Profe Austin come in, and he's going to explain it for us, all right? Buen día, alumnos. Me dice Austin de la calle que podrían usar un poco de ayuda con esta regla. So I'm just going to explain this to you guys really quick before I get back to planning my next lesson. So the first thing that we need to know is that in Spanish, all nouns are going to be either masculine or feminine. Now, masculine nouns are going to generally take the article el to say the, or un to say a. And feminine nouns are generally going to take the article la or una to say the or a. Now, there are going to be times where certain feminine words are going to use the articles el or un instead of la or una, but then they'll use las or unas when they're plural. So let's just explain this really quick. So the first thing that we need to know is this all has to do with pronunciation. Now, if you've already seen my video on pronunciation rules in Spanish, this is going to be a lot easier for you to understand. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out with the link up top. But what we need to know here is that in Spanish, identical, unstressed syllables are going to be merged when we have the same syllable at the end of one word and the start of the next word. So one example we have here, so the sentence is, él va a hacer el café. The words are, él va a hacer el café. He's going to make the coffee. So these three words all use the same unstressed ah sound. So what we're going to do here is we're going to merge these three into this syllable right here, which is going to be ba. So the way that Spanish speakers are going to say this is, él va a hacer el café. Él va a hacer el café. So again, va a hacer, you're going to merge all of those into ba. So where does this confusion come in with the el versus la? So the articles el and un are going to be swapped in instead of la or una when we have feminine nouns that start with a stressed ah sound. So some examples of this are el ala, the wing, un alma, a soul, el agua, the water, un águila, an eagle, and el hambre, the hunger. So with águila, it's obvious here that the A is going to be stressed because it uses the accent mark. We always stress our accent marks in our words. And the rest of these words are two-syllable words that end with a vowel. And because of that, that means that the second to last syllable is the one that's going to be stressed in those words. And because these are two-syllable words, obviously that means that the first syllable is going to be stressed. So hambre, agua, alma, and ala. And of course, the H here is silent, so it's hambre, it's not hambre. So, when we have plurals and diminutives, we do not need to follow this rule. And the reason for that is because the plurals are going to use an S at the end of the article, which is going to break that syllable that would have otherwise been joined. So, we've got el ala and un ala. But when it's plural, it's going to be las alas and unas alas. Again, this has to do with pronunciation. Because Spanish speakers merge those unstressed syllables, what's going to happen when they have an unstressed vowel sound followed immediately by a stressed vowel sound, it's going to create just a really awkward break in the flow of the conversation, the flow of the syllables that the speaker is saying. So what Spanish speakers do is, in order to not have that where they're saying la ala, where you have that unstressed followed by stress, la ala, it's just awkward, they're going to use el instead. So we've got el ala, but that S breaks that requirement and gives us las alas. And the same thing goes for diminutives, because diminutives are going to take a two-syllable word and they're going to turn it into a three-syllable word. So here we have la alita. So that means the little wing. By the way, you guys, if you like chicken wings, if you're like me, I could scarf down probably 15 chicken wings in one sitting. I love those. But we generally call those alitas because they're little guys. So la alita. So that la is going to be merged with the first syllable of alita because it is a three-syllable word now, which ends in a vowel, meaning the second to last syllable, which is going to be li, is now the one that's stressed. So the phrase is la alita. And with our plural diminutives, of course, it escapes that requirement as well. So we have las alitas. So again, we have that S right there at the end of las, so it's going to break that first syllable, and then the second syllable right here is an unstressed A, and then we've got a stressed li. Now, the last thing I want to talk about real quick before I let you guys get back to hanging out with Austin de la Calle is if you have these requirements on the word, that doesn't mean that it is now a masculine word. So, un agua fresca, or a fresh water. So it's un, even though it's feminine, but the adjective that we use at the end right here, fresca, is still going to end with that A because we're still describing a feminine word. So if you guys haven't had aguas frescas before, they are delicious. Definitely go next time you go to a Mexican restaurant or a Latin restaurant. Ask them about them. They're made from fruits and they're really yummy. I definitely recommend them. So that's all I've got for you guys. I need to get back to planning my next lesson. Don't forget, go check out my posts in the community tab where I put up my polls asking for suggestions on coming lessons. I want to know exactly what you guys are looking to learn. So let me know, and you guys can go ahead and get back to hanging out with Austin de la Calle. All right, adios.
¿Un marciano sentado en el ala?
Un marciano sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca.
¿Un marciano sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca?
Un marciano sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca que quiere entrar.
¿Un marciano sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca que quiere entrar?
¿O es la sopa?
¿Qué chingallos?
Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about here is that Qué Ch. So that's an expression. It basically means like, what the fuck, or what the hell. It's used for like amazement or shock or just like, whoa. But again, it's very vulgar. Anything that uses that chinga or chingar, that's a Mexican slang and it's really vulgar, okay? So just use it with caution. But basically what we're talking about here, that Qué Chingados, it's usually used with a D sound, Qué Chingados. But the D sound in Spanish, it doesn't hit nearly as hard as it does in English. A lot of times it almost completely drops off when Spanish speakers are saying words that end with ADO or IDO, which is very common because that's pretty much how all adjectives are formed. As far as the chingallos with the double L, a lot of that just has to do mostly with the fact that D sound does kind of drop off. So that A to O sound, they kind of put that double L in the middle. It's kind of funny though, because gallo is the word for rooster or cock. So actually one of the videos that I'm sharing with you guys today, when he says "Qué chingallos," he actually holds up a rooster, which is just really funny. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on.
¿O es la sopa de hongos que me hace ver al marciano que está sentado en el ala de un vuelo de taca que quiere entrar?
A huevo que es la sopa de hongos que me hace ver al marciano que está sentado en el ala.
Okay, so the last two things that I really want to talk about here are that a huevo, which is an expression that it's pretty interesting. It can be used for a number of different things depending on the region that the speaker is from. But especially when it comes to Mexico specifically, that a huevo is kind of like a term used for agreement, for enthusiastic agreement. It's like fuck yeah or hell yeah, or you know, it's just oh yeah, like a really enthusiastic agreement. The other expression we've got here is me hace ver. Now that means makes me see. In this case, it's me hace ver because it makes me see. Now, a lot of times we use expressions which are kind of similar to this, but we use the subjunctive instead. Now, the difference between the two is the lack of certainty that comes along with the subjunctive. So just to give you an example, if I wanted to say in Spanish, my boss made me arrive early yesterday, that would be ayer el patrón me hizo llegar temprano. So it's going to use the infinitive here instead of the subjunctive. Me hizo llegar temprano. He made me arrive early. Because the action has been completed. The action was undertaken. Now, a different way that we could say something similar that is going to call for the subjunctive is with that lack of certainty. So if we want to say, the boss wants me to arrive early tomorrow, we would say, el patrón quiere que llegue temprano mañana. So that llegue is from the verb llegar, to arrive. And it's being used with a subjunctive because the boss wants it to happen. He wants me to arrive early tomorrow. But am I going to arrive early tomorrow? Who knows, right? So that lack of certainty is really the biggest thing that calls for the subjunctive. But with the me hace ver, al marciano. So it makes me see the Martian. So this action of seeing it, because it makes me see it, is underway. It is completed. Me hace ver. Okay?
Un vuelo de caca que quiere entrar.
Me convierto en marciano.
Alright guys, well that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Like I said, we've learned a lot of vulgarity today, so just use it sparingly going forward. Please don't blame me if you end up pissing off a native Spanish speaker and getting yourself in trouble. That's on you, okay? Just be careful. So, I really appreciate it. If you learned something today, or if you just had fun with me, I would love it if you would just drop a like on this video. It makes a world of difference for me and the YouTube algorithm. I hope to see you guys again soon. Hasta la próxima!